navigate.
Now, if everyone can mute, right? Please. Except Sadia.
The panel will go live in under 1 minute. The panel is now live.
Hello, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining us for CSW. We welcome you, and especially to this panel, because we are focusing on Europe in a sense and beyond, and we know that the CSW platform tends to be quite US based, so we're really happy to have this panel from Europe dealing with European issues centered around women. And we have an overview of what are the serious challenges currently faced by women and their rights, especially post-COVID, and with the backdrop of what's happening in Ukraine currently, and of course other commodity sectors such as energy and various other issues we're having economically, technically with censorship, cyber warfare, and all of those issues, and violence against women, which is very high during the pandemic and continues to be. So I'm really glad to know that we've got some expert speakers with us today that we're really honored to have, and who will bring their insights into how the pandemic has affected their sectors and the women and the issues they deal with. I'd like to invite Cheryl Miller of DLI, who is the co-sponsor of this panel with WUNRN, and would like her to take the floor now, please.
Thank you so much, Sadia, and thank you to you and Lois and your colleague Sarah for being the engine to bring this very important and timely group and discussion together. And welcome to everyone who's joining us out there as part of CSW 2022. I am the head of the Digital Leadership Institute that's based in Brussels, and we have the mission of inclusive digital transformation, which really focuses on grassroots efforts to get more girls and women into tech sectors, also digitally skilled, and especially as entrepreneurs and leaders. And in this context, I also have the honor of being the co-head of the EU Delegation to the Women20, which is the stakeholder engagement group for women facing the G20 organization. And in that context, I'm really proud to introduce you to my 3 fellow delegates of the EU delegation, starting with my illustrious co-head of delegation, Katharina Miller, who will be our first presenter today. And just for the ground rules, each of the speakers will let you know what their perspective is on this important question that Sadia introduced. And at the end, we will have some questions from the moderators and open the floor up to Q&A from the participants and attendees. So starting with Katharina, if you'd like to give us a small word about your background, and then of course, jump into the discussion that you will be intervening on today, please.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you so much, Cheryl. Fantastic role model for me for co-organizing, co-sponsoring this event, at the same to Sadia. So thank you so much for inviting us. I'm not only speaking to you as the co-lead of the W20, but also as the president of the European Women Lawyers Association, which is a federation of all associations of women lawyers within Europe, European Union, but also EFTA states. And of course, we are also partnering with all our lawyer sisters around the world. So we're very open to connect with everybody, really. Our focus is law. And I've been asked, and I'm very happy to have accepted to speak on a timely discussion on women peacekeepers and women displaced by conflict. And this is a very important issue to talk about. I'm just thinking about the 15th of August of last year, when the Taliban finished with the democratic process in Afghanistan and made it impossible for our dear beloved sisters in Afghanistan to continue their fantastic process of democracy and peace and their most important work. And there I would like to raise something which I think everybody, all the politicians seem to forget also now in the Ukraine and Russia discussion, which is a very, very, very important resolution. This is the resolution of, it's called 1325. And what is this resolution about? Well, this resolution is about having women in peacekeeping or in conflict situations involved from the very beginning on, because in the object of this resolution is to involve women in the prevention and resolution of conflicts and their importance in their equal participation and full involvement in all efforts for the maintenance and promotion of peace and security. And I have to say, I'm very astonished that I think we were the only ones with our other sisters, of course, who were lobbying this resolution 1325, because I think this should be a most famous resolution and applied in all situations where we see there are conflicts. And this is not the case, because if we look at the photos of the men that discussed what they were doing in Afghanistan or now in Russia, there are not really women on the table. And this is really a problem, because we know that if we have women on the table, women are not better people. However, women seem to promote more the peace building process. So it's important that we are there, that we are visible, and that we're integrated in this very important part. The other aspect I would like to talk about in a nutshell is migrant women. As women lawyers, we have been observing that migrant women that are living between us in the European Union have a much harder time to have a good life between us, living between us. That starts with violence against women. We know, for example, I am based in Spain, and we know that that most of migrant women, that most women that die of femicides are migrant women, even though that migrant women are more likely to go to the police and to say that there is an issue, a problem, but Spanish police would not believe them. So there's definitely an issue for migrant women. And I think altogether that we are here and that are listening to us, or maybe later that you listen to the recording, we have to think of how to make the Istanbul Convention applicable, especially for migrant women that live between us and are suffering most than we white women that live on this fantastic continent. That's what I wanted to tell you, and I'm happy to engage with you later. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Katharina, for highlighting probably these, the edge of the wedge, I would say, in terms of what are the most challenging circumstances for women to be in, and that are obviously exacerbated by COVID. And now, of course, with the conflict in Ukraine and 2 million people crossing into Poland and the rest of the EU in particular, knowing that these are women and that they are children and that they are very vulnerable crossing the borders, we need to be certain that they have protection. And to our next discussion is a focus on, from migrants and the, and conflict to what is happening with our girls and women in the steady state, but also in the response to COVID. What are the challenges as far as preparing them for the economic recovery and the opportunities? And I would like to hand it over to our EU delegate, Tamara Dancheva, who's the Senior Manager of International Relations at the GSMA, with an intervention on enabling female digital leaders of the future and a safe digital space for all.
Thank you so much, Cheryl and colleagues. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. I'm particularly pleased to be addressing this event with my two hats, of course, because it allows me to look at the issues with a quite unique perspective. Now, for those of you, of course, who have not heard of GSMA, we represent the global mobile industry. So, we therefore have quite an important power in convening the mobile ecosystem. And in fact, we became the first sector to commit to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which of course is really important, not least because we know that unless SDG 5 on gender equality is achieved, none of the other SDGs can be achieved. So in that sense, for us, of course, driving digital gender inclusion is particularly important topic, which is, of course, also why it's particularly important for us to contribute to the discussions as part of the EU delegation to W20, not least because I think often we tend to underestimate the situation on that front in Europe, right? Because we often think, well, Europe represents, let's say, the more developed part of the world. Therefore, we automatically assume that women and girls don't face challenges or they face very little challenges. When in fact, unfortunately, the situation is quite different. So for today's discussions, I just put some more recent statistics just to put things again into perspective, because I think it's important to recognize that we are actually facing just as many challenges as any other continent, right? Now, only 1 in 3, in fact, STEM graduates is a woman, right? 1 in 6 ICT specialists in the EU is a woman. And only 19% of European ICT entrepreneurs are women. And so, again, kind of listening to this, certainly doesn't paint a pink picture, but at the same time, we can agree that, there are multiple reasons, of course, why we still find ourselves in this situation, even if arguably women and girls are offered more opportunities across Europe as a whole. Although, of course, Katharina, of course, highlighted the difference there when it comes to migrant women, refugee women, and so forth. And last but not least, when we look at women working in the ICT sector, again, they earn on average 20% less than men in the EU as such. So clearly, we face a lot of challenges. At the same time, COVID has certainly stopped some of the progress on gender equality, particularly also digital gender equality, which I would argue is critical for achieving overall equality, right, and equity between men and women. We know that the EU's gender equality strategy for the next 5 years does call actually for Europe, where there is more diversity, where women are recognized not just as let's say consumers, but also as active, let's say, inventors, right, when it comes to technological advancements and so forth. So that is, let's say, where we stand as of today. And again, as I mentioned, the pandemic certainly highlighted actually the critical importance of connectivity, of being part of the digital economy, of remaining of course, also independent, which is, of course, particularly relevant for women, which tend to be excluded. Now, how do we tackle this challenge, right? And again, what are some of the issues that we also tackled and made sure we presented to G20 leaders last year, and certainly we will continue to do so this year with the Indonesian presidency. First and foremost, we have to agree that we need to ensure that STEM skills, of course, are an obligatory part of any educational endeavors, particularly, of course, at at the elementary level, but also, of course, as women, young girls, of course, but also women progress. I think we also often tend to underestimate the importance of soft skills and role models, right? We always focus on how do we make sure that we equip women and girls with basic digital skills, also advanced digital skills, not least because 90% of future jobs will require them. I mean, that's great and that's important. But how do we turn these young women into female leaders in the digital economy? Well, we have to build their overall profile, right? So we need to ensure that we also complement those skills, as I said, with soft skills, certainly exposure to role models. And for that, we also need strong, monitoring and implementation instruments. So let me give you one example from the EU. And again, I'm cautious that I'm running out of time, so I'll stop with that. You know that the EU, of course, tracks progress among EU member states on these critical issues through the Women in Digital Scoreboard. So this is a great example of a tool that any member, any government out there can adopt, of course, also outside of the EU, to track and monitor progress on these issues. Because we can agree that until and unless you know what challenges you're facing, you are, of course, as a member state, as a government, unable to implement strategies that correspond to that solution. So that is just one small example. But again, I'll stop here and I would welcome your questions afterwards. Thank you.
Terrific. I think that's an excellent segue to our next intervention by Anne Ravanona, who is the head of Global Investor and who will speak on the subject of women's entrepreneurship, where we know there are a lot of touch points with digital skills and also, not to be understated, financial inclusion. So I will leave it to Anne to take up these very important and relevant subjects. Anne?
Thank you, Cheryl, and thank you very much, both Katharina and Tamara, for being fabulous colleagues at the EU delegation to W20, and to all our esteemed panelists today. I'm honoured to be alongside you in this important discussion. So yes, we've spoken now about different angles when it touches women and girls and the impact of COVID, and I would like to focus on entrepreneurship and access to finance. So there's no surprise that COVID has actually impacted disproportionately women entrepreneurs versus male entrepreneurs, and why. So I want to give you a couple of examples of that. So for example, in Germany, female entrepreneurs were more likely to experience an income loss of at least 35% than males during 2020. And also, why is it impacting more? Because female entrepreneurs tend to be in the sectors that are actually hardest hit. So we tend to be personal services, tourism, retail, arts, entertainment, everything that actually died down during the pandemic. Of course, we are also predominantly in the healthcare sector as caregivers and also service providers, healthcare service providers. So that's also means we have been severely impacted. And our businesses have been less financially resilient for different reasons. And I want to kind of pick that up as well. So for example, women entrepreneurs have, access less capital, a third basically of the capital that male entrepreneurs access in general. Also, I want to share with you a couple of things from a recent OECD study that kind of says, okay, where is this at? So OECD has said that we basically are funding our business with less capital, and we tend to be financing our businesses with our own money versus looking for outside capital. And that, of course, given the current situation, is having a big impact. Also, Forbes have reported recently that only 25% of female entrepreneurs actually go looking for funding versus 34% of men. So we have to actually ask and make that step forward to go looking for it. And when we go looking for loans, we're a third less likely to get loans. So there's loads of structural barriers in place in Europe for women entrepreneurs. And again, we would think we'd be past that, but not totally yet. And so therefore, our businesses have been a bit more vulnerable because our financial reserves are less. Makes sense. And of course, during this, we've had to think smarter, harder, pivot harder during the pandemic. And even though we've been able to get some government funding, because many of you who are women entrepreneurs have been able to benefit from that, and we're lucky that in Europe, in many, many instances, we've been able to do it, it's not enough. So it's also important to look at what are the key trends affecting funding and access to capital in Europe. There's some general ones, and on the good, I want to give you some good news. So on the good news, there are more female founder friendly focused sources of fundings coming out. So more grants, more angel networks, more venture capital funds focusing only on funding women entrepreneurs. And we're seeing more and more in Europe, which is great. And not tiny ones like the micro funds of 1 million, 5 million. We're seeing more, 150 million. That's starting to be substantial, and that's a good thing. And also, even when it comes to funding our business, women entrepreneurs have had to find innovative ways to continue to keep going during the pandemic. So we've seen the rise of alternative ways of funding our businesses. So through pre-sales, never really happened before. So more and more entrepreneurs were kind of doing pre-sales, or also creating these cards so that when their services were back up and running, they can get the revenue in advance and then deliver the services once they were able to open up after COVID. So that was a new thing that we saw. And some, of course, brick and mortar businesses had to go online. So we've seen more going to online, which, as we know, as Tamara has painted that picture, there's some structural barriers there. So we're going online. We need to upskill. And again, Cheryl is an absolute expert on that point of upskilling the women entrepreneurs and girls as well in tech. So those are things that have been happening. So when it comes to venture capital, what do we see? So the big markets are still absolutely UK, Germany, and France. And let's say worldwide, women-owned businesses only get 2% of venture capital. Now that's gone down from 2.3%, 2.8%, but it hasn't really moved in the past 30 years. And in Europe, I'm sad to say, it's worse. So in the UK and in France, women entrepreneurs only get 1% of venture capital, right? So we're even going worse there. Also, and all across all of Europe, women entrepreneurs have gotten 1.3% across the whole region of venture capital. Right, so that's in venture capital. On the positive side, what's happening? We're seeing more remote investing, because before, investors want to meet face to face. So we're having to adapt with the technology, and investors are now more open to doing deals online. There is plenty of great companies to invest in. So the deal flow hasn't changed. So that's a good thing to know. And then we are seeing some higher valuations as well in Europe, which is a great thing. We're seeing more unicorns, not enough female-led, I must say. They're just very, very few and far between. In France, we've now hit the first 25 unicorns, not one of them women-led. So, still far to go. The key sectors that are working are healthcare, wellness, edtech, femtech, collaborative platforms, again, riding the tech side of things, silver economy, the care economy, and agri-tech. Of course, because we need to build forward better, and we need to build with the green transition, we need more agriculture too, but it's not moving faster enough. So what are the key challenges that we need to kind of overcome for that? We need more women investors. Today, only 14 to 20% of angel investors are women, and when venture capitalists, about 8 to 12%. So we actually need more money at the table. Again, like Katharina was saying at the beginning, we need more women at the table. We need more men to invest in women entrepreneurs. That's a big thing. And we need a lot more advocacy and visibility, role models. You'll hear that coming up time and time again. We need to see the great success stories in Europe. We have them, we just need to see more of them, such as Neuritas, a great Irish startup. They've now gone on to their Series B, Series C. They're exploding. So there's some great stuff happening. So what can we do? What's the way forward? I want to say that 4 different things. For women entrepreneurs, know that you can do it. I want you to know that you can do it and you can get the funding that you need. You just need to ask for funding, and you need to ask for more money. That's important, right? And have a blend of sources of funding. Look for the grants, look for the angel investment, and look for the bank loans, look for crowdfunding. you know, look at different sources. Seek out your women entrepreneur communities. You need to have that sisterhood of other entrepreneurs, and I'd say also women entrepreneurs, and we do that as well at Global Invest Her, and focus on building new revenue streams, right? Going more online where you can. Keep going, you can do it. Governments, what can governments do? For those of you who are working in them, I want you to hear, I think you need to help continue to break down the barriers. So in our W20 communique last year, we had a proposal suggesting that 1 percentage point of the 15% corporation tax go towards funding women entrepreneurs. Wouldn't that be amazing if some European governments actually took that on board? We need some more government policy on women entrepreneurs and on women in business, which we're seeing some governments do, like in Ireland, actually my home country. I'm very progressive, even though I'm based in Paris. And we need to see more gender inclusive public procurement. This silly figure again, 1% of public procurement worldwide goes to women entrepreneurs. Okay, so that's another option, and it's an opportunity. So my call to investors would say, make a point of seeking out women entrepreneurs. And if you can't find them, first of all, come to check out Global Invest Her in our directory. I'll share the link. But, you know, ask your investors, seek us out, because we are there. And there's a huge opportunity, because the research says that when you invest in women entrepreneurs, you can add 12 trillion to the global economy. So we can all benefit from that. And last but not least, all of us here are consumers. The best form of funding is a paying customer. So everybody here, we can take the money out of our wallet and buy from women entrepreneurs. So there are the key points I wanted to share today.
Thank you so much, Anne. And I just, before I hand over the moderator role to Sadia, I wanted to, of course, recognize that it is Equal Pay Day. Today in the United States, a woman has actually worked long enough to earn the same as the mean salary for men in the US for 2021. And one of the themes, of course, is that women just don't ask for the money that we deserve at the entrance. And of course, that has a magnitude impact over time. So indeed, it's about asking, and I think we should come back at the end to these, what are the way forward questions, because that I would like to also hear from our other EU colleagues. And in the meantime, I'll hand it over to Sadia to introduce the panelists.
Thank you, Cheryl, and thank you, Katharina, Tamara, and Anna. That's really interesting, all of your interventions and your insights into the areas that you work. But also, you know, it gives us some kind of sense of hope. And I know things look quite bleak at the moment, and we can talk about that going forward. But at least that there is work like this. WUNRN itself has worked alongside the working officers of the UN Special Rights Procedures since its inception. So we know about gender rights, of course, and Article 1325 and CEDAW, and how important these instruments are for women's rights. And anyway, we'll go forward with this discussion, but I want to invite Mandy Langera, who is really, I think I'd call her the sort of motivational lady from grassroots, but also very tech orientated. I mean, who hasn't she kind of worked with, and very on top of her issues as far as SDGs, trafficking, and also has her pulse on the ground, let's put it this way, and really reaches out at grassroots level. And that's very important in these discussions, to see what's happening on the ground in these sectors. So Mandy, without further ado, I hope I've done your introduction justice.
You have. Thank you so much, and it's a great honor to be on the panel with so many amazing women, and it's just great to hear about from Katharina, first of all, talking about Afghanistan. And actually, before the crisis started, I was actually supporting the UK government to evacuate the interpreters, and we were on track to evacuate, and sadly I've continued to evacuate till today. And me and my team have taken out 397 individuals from Afghanistan. It's been a very difficult, challenging task, because when you move one person, there's another 10 people waiting behind wanting to be evacuated. But again, for me, it was about that there were so many young women that had been educated, who had done law degrees, that were activists and campaigners, and they wanted to continue that journey. The day that the Taliban took over, their dreams and everything had just ended. They were horrified that everything that they knew, the freedom, especially the young people, they never grew up in the era of the Taliban. They grew up in an era of like the West being there, children having freedom, and to lose that overnight was absolutely shocking and awful for them. So, I feel very grateful to the governments in Europe, Germany, France, UK, and America and Canada, and other countries, Spain now, taking on refugees and helping us to do that. And more recently, with the Ukraine crisis and the countries coming together. And just today, like 90,000 people in the UK have opened up their homes to welcome Ukraine refugees. So I think it's, a step in the right direction, but there's a lot of work to be done. As we've come out of the pandemic and we're coming back to so-called normal, we have to sort of look back at how women have been affected. And just listening to Anna talking about some of the great things that she's doing, and like you talking about businesses, and I've seen so many women lose their businesses overnight. They were in the beauty sector, in the catering, and those are the sectors, like you said, been hit the hardest. But there's been lots of shadow pandemics. So the pandemic of domestic violence, that had gone through the roof, where people were left at home and nobody really talked about that. Children were at home with their parents, and home is not always a safe place for every single child. And we saw that, children sadly died and they were abused, and there was a lot of awful things happening. And then the mental health crisis. So there were so many other shadow pandemics alongside the pandemic of COVID. And now we're coming out of this, and now we're hitting a global recession, and we're also looking at, fuel prices going up, and everything's just the cost of living going up, and people losing their homes, they've lost their jobs. And it's about, how do we bring that back? How do we make sure that we leave no one behind? So for the last 18 months, I've been supporting Female Quotient, which is an organization in America run by a friend of mine, Shelley Zallis. And we were doing virtual dinners around the country and then all around the world in different countries, and it was the FQ Global Pack dinners. And on next week, on the 23rd, we are having a global campaign, the world's biggest dinner, bringing women together from all over the world. So I'm calling upon all of my panelists here today to bring other women together and giving them a seat at the table. We have a moral responsibility. And for me, somebody who has smashed that glass ceiling, I always say it's become a floor for the next generation to come up. And I'm so passionate about sending the elevator back down and making sure that I address those social economic barriers that are affecting young people. So people like Nadia, who is an incredibly talented young woman, who's an academic, who's done so much amazing work, just because she's not visible and she's not always seen doesn't mean she's not doing the good work. So we have a responsibility to mentor and pay it forward and make sure that we bring other people up behind us. And I keep saying this to a lot of my friends, and I know that it's very difficult. And as I go to Davos, and I'm going to Bali for the G20, and I want to make sure that I'm bringing young people up behind me and making sure that they are given seats and they are coming to those events and they can address those issues. And when I was talking to the class of 2020, my niece was one of those people that did her degree, but actually to find a graduate job was quite difficult, but she did manage to find one, because she got a first in her degree. She was an A-class student in school, and she spoke multiple languages, and she was quite clever. But then I've seen so many other children not getting those graduate jobs, young people not getting the grades that they thought they were going to get. And the university experience has not been the same, so they've not gone to university. And now young people are ending up in jobs that they don't really want. So I think, as much as we're thinking about building back better and leveling that playing field, we've really got to address those issues. And we have to really talk about those barriers that are affecting young women, whether that is migrant women, whether that is young people, whether that is older women, or, women that have been juggling so many responsibilities in recent years around caregiving, becoming a teacher, trying to keep their business afloat and trying to do the job, work part-time and trying to work. And I think there has been some opportunity. So when we think about, like, you know, working from home, that you might be able to support and save on childcare. So there has been some opportunities. People have set up businesses and they've gone and followed their heart and did different things. But it's about making sure that now that we create real opportunities. And if you're in a position to pay it forward and you are in an organization or somewhere where you can actually mentor and help somebody, then please do that. So I've now been very passionate about bringing some of my friends together who are in banking or in finance or in law to mentor an Afghan woman who's in the UK in a hotel right now. Give her an opportunity, give away 3 hours of your time. I'm not asking a lot. And actually, when you think that that's literally half an hour a day, sometimes I'm asking you to just make a phone call to check in on somebody to see how they're doing and how can they be supported. It could just be like, actually, how did your English class go? And sometimes having that spoken conversation with somebody is what they want. They can read English, but it's the spoken part of English that they're lacking, or they lack that confidence to have that conversation. And sometimes just having a phone call. So like Cheryl and you and I could have a conversation on the phone. And actually, the more that I speak to you, the more confident I'm going to become, the more I'm going to feel like, wow, my English is really improving. And actually, oh yes, so you know, when Anna's using that kind of slang word, I know what that means now, because actually they read out of a dictionary. And when you come to Britain, trust me, it's nothing like the English that you've been taught in school, because whether I meet migrants from the global south or Africa or from anywhere else, they always say, that isn't the English that we were taught at school. So it's, you know, it's that spoken part. And sometimes it's just those little things that we can do can make a real difference. And again, like, correct me, I can't, I think, was it, I can't think who actually talked about the pay gap. I think it was yourself, Cheryl, that no, sorry, it was Tamara who talked about women's pay being, you know, like 20%, 23% less than men. And again, that's gone back. So the World Economic Forum has told us it's gone back by 130 years. So it's not going to happen in our lifetime. And again, so I think it's about looking at practical ways of supporting women by becoming a mentor, by offering a seat at the table. And even if somebody doesn't have the confidence or don't feel like they belong in that room, trust me, give them a seat enough times, they will find their voice. And for me, I've always been so passionate about making sure that the voiceless have a voice, and that, you know, we are helping those that feel like they don't deserve that help, but they do. And I feel like I wanted to see the change that I want to see in the world. And I think we all have a moral responsibility to level that playing field as we go forward. On that note, I'm going to end because I'm conscious of time, and I would love to take questions afterwards.
Thank you so much, Mandy. I mean, this whole seat at the table thing was so fascinating for me, and I think everybody who was involved in it. The fact that, you know, women were coming together during the pandemic and having these dinners and offering seats, and also the work you do with the volunteering for the refugees. I think that's wonderful. I've been a student counselor myself, and just the fact that you have that one-to-one with vulnerable adults, it's really it helps in so many ways. And I grew up in a war myself, so I came here to the UK quite sort of later, and yeah, so it's amazing how these opportunities, you have to really source them out, or feel that you are enabling, or at least they're visible to you, where they're often not. So thank you for that. And next I'm going to invite Gulzar Falatunzadeh, who is been a WUNRN intern or associate, research associate, and she's been important because she's really helped us reach out to the youth and be in touch with the youth programs across Europe, but definitely in Germany. And I don't want to say too much about her, she can do that, but I'll tell you one thing, she's one hardworking girl. So welcome, Gulzar.
Thank you very much, Ms. Muir. Yeah, distinguished panelists, I'm very, very honored to be here today. My name is Golzar, and today I would like to give you some insights into my youth and gender-led work as research associate for WUNRN EU and as the head of the JUSOS Düsseldorf. Through my work at WUNRN, I have been instrumental in liaising with the young girl and youth elements of the work of WUNRN in Europe and beyond. Therefore, I have been trained and worked under Ms. Muir's direct supervision, as she is responsible for work in the EU. And one of the key mandates that we have been working on during my tenure was with the webinar on violence against women, highlighting online harassment and looking into extending the laws created to protect women offline and expanding them to cover the online aspect too. Since I had helped shape the election campaign for the former mayor of Düsseldorf, we from WUNRN EU had also the chance to meet him during his election campaign in 2020, as the involvement of politicians can be essential for gender-based change in society, beginning in a city like my own hometown, Düsseldorf. And in this sense, we met and maintained contact with further politicians, such as with environmental activists or the press spokesperson of the Green Party in Germany, as well as with a lot of members of the Social Democratic Party of Germany, the SPD. For example, members of the Parliament of Hamburg from committees like anti-discrimination, gender equality, and European affairs. And another point is that we were eager to link the key concerns of current women's issues with the youth of the young Social and Democratic Party in Germany, called the JUSOS of Düsseldorf, as we and me too personally consider the interfaces between the two aspects to be very, very important and essential. Therefore, I assisted WUNRN EU to initiate a webinar on Afghanistan with the JUSOS Düsseldorf in September 2021. Here we set up an online event on the immediate situation in Afghanistan to inform the youth. We had a discussion and Q&A session with the young people and started a still lasting cooperation with them. Additionally, we organized a second learning module entitled Community Youth Work and Women's Rights this year with the JUSOS Düsseldorf, the head of the JUSOS of North Rhine-Westphalia, as well as the JUSOS Bavaria, which was very, very helpful as students learned about the various mechanisms that support women's rights and gender equality. The module was very well received by the young politicians. Many questions were asked, and Ms. Muir was also asked to offer such modules more often in the future for us JUSOS. And in this line, we continued and widened our cooperation with political youth organizations all around Germany. Furthermore, I'm very grateful to represent urgent topics with which WUNRN deals, meaning, for example, the situation of women in Afghanistan or post-COVID recovery at conferences such as the National German Model United Nations Conference in Berlin last year, or the International Model United Nations Conference in New York next month. I am very grateful to meet hundreds of young students from all around the world there and to listen to different ideas and standpoints of people from different world nations and countries, as well as discuss together with them solutions for great problems of humanity and bring them into my work at WUNRN. Moreover, Women's UN Report Network EU started cooperating with German ministries last year, where I had the chance to help organizing, moderating, and translating meetings, for instance, with the women's wing of the German Ministry on Gender Equality of North Rhine-Westphalia. during our meetings, with the ministry, our aim was to participate as a women's rights organization in the topic of equality in North Rhine-Westphalia, and as the problem of violence against women is unfortunately becoming more and more present today due to the pandemic. At these meetings, we talked about the problems and solutions of, for instance, COVID-19's impact on women and girls, how it is disproportionately affected women and compared especially to men, and for instance, especially the economic aspect of this. Also COVID-19 highlighting the increase in violence against women offline and online, climate change as a huge concern, as well as we are witnessed the migration issue all over Europe, and the backlash last year on women's rights with Turkey pulling out of the Istanbul Convention. All these topics were issues we talked about with the ministry. And therefore today we have the ministry as one of our great cooperating partners with which we promote and which we assist with our research and reports. And I'm very, very grateful and honored for the opportunity to be part of this project, to help shape society through my little work at WUNRN-Women as a big organization that is very essential. As I would like to, as we heard before, and as Gandhi once said, be the change I wish to see in this world. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Golzar. And I don't think you pointed out that you're still studying. So you're doing all this and you're still studying, but I'm
studying in Heidelberg.
Yeah, she's doing law, but she is our pulse on the youth kind of and what's happening. So thank you for that. And now, Cheryl, should I introduce you, or would you like to introduce yourself?
Would you like to introduce me, or were you going to go first? I'm happy to go at the end.
I think Golzar said quite a lot about our work. Perhaps it's good to hear from you about your work, and then I can.
Sure. I mean, okay, with pleasure. Just, I'm going to warn you because I'm, you know, a woman in tech, but working remotely, and my bandwidth is not very good either. But I'm still going to be ambitious and try to do a presentation that, please forgive me, some of you have seen. I think it's been my mantra for, 12 years. And unfortunately, not enough is changing, which is why it's a mantra. So I'm also going to plug in the share screen feature, and then everything might implode. And if that happens, then we'll just go back to a manual workaround, because we are women and we are prepared. So here I go. Thanks for bearing with me, and ping me if somehow you lose me completely, just to let me know, okay? And I'm really excited. Can you see my screen now? I'm really excited to be, in Europe. That's a unique opportunity that we have, but I always like to start the discussion by taking an arm's length out of Europe and say, we have almost 8 billion people in the world, half of whom are women. And I'm going to repeat some of the things that Tamara and Katharina mentioned, but I want to go a little bit deeper so we get a sense of the urgency and the gravity here that's now being compounded by the pandemic and by geopolitical unrest. So, we fortunately in COVID, we did have the opportunity to still sit at the table, right? Because of technology. So it has this opportunity to be a great equalizer, but I want to flag something that's really important. Of all the people in the world who are online, well, only a third of the population of the planet, as little as 8 years ago, was online. Now that number is more than half. But the dangerous thing, or the risky thing, the uncomfortable thing, is that women are coming online at a much slower rate than men, to a factor of 234 million fewer women online than men. Boy, that slide looks bad in high definition. But when we look at Europe though, so that's the global picture. In Europe, it's the same. Women are less likely to have access to the internet, more likely to have no or low digital skills, much less likely, as Tamara said, by a factor of 1 to 4 to be an IT professional, and far less likely to found an IT startup, which is, as Anne was saying, how can we have women unicorns if we have this intersection of technology and entrepreneurship? That's like a kind of double whammy. There are no women in tech, there are no women doing startup, or not enough. And tech is really an important enabler for entrepreneurship. But to be a unicorn, you actually have to be doing tech-driven business. And that's becoming more and more the case. And this is where women are not, in fact, at the table. So we're not at the table in terms of old school corporate, patriarchy, but we're also not at the table where the new economy and the strategic innovation is happening either. We like to say that things are great in Europe, but actually we don't have internet parity, as it's called. We don't have gender parity. And we're still doing a bit better than other parts of the world, but not as good as others. And this is despite the fact that Europe has the most broadband penetration of any region on the planet, except South Korea, or South Korea is in that same group. And here I am, remote and trying to connect, and it's spotty. So even with that kind of opportunity, women may or may not have access. And then if you look at other parts of the world, it's even worse. But back to Europe, where we do have this, the digital scorecard for Europe. And fortunately, we're looking at these numbers at a European level and seeing them not change. But among the unskilled of, in terms of digital skills in Europe, still the larger percentage of unskilled are female. And I guess that doesn't really surprise anyone. But despite our efforts to address this challenge, and there are efforts happening, no matter how the trend moves, there's always this lag of about 12 million fewer women who have digital skills than men. And that's 2% of the whole EU population. So it's this disproportionate thing that if we try to dig into why that is the case, then in fact it's the same as anywhere in the world. We literally have these white zones where there is no access, and in those same areas, disproportionately fewer women have the skills that they need to be able to use the technology, even when it's there. And one of the most frightening things for me, and this is also duplicated everywhere in the world, but we're talking about Europe now. In the last 13 years, we have not added a single woman more to the IT professional workforce than what we had back in 2009. This is despite, everything is digitalized today, right? We're working digitally, education is digital, entertainment is digital. So it's not only the IT sector that has spiraled out of control, and even during COVID, but every other, whether it's booking a flight or booking a car or booking a movie or going to the movies, we're doing everything digitally. So all of these sectors are disrupted. And so the demand for these skill sets is skyrocketing, and the number of jobs being filled are predominantly being filled by men. So really to a factor of 80%. And so I ask you, while and this has repercussions for the whole world, because the internet is being built in Europe, and more than that, in the US, where the situation isn't different. And that means that designing, building, and leading in our society has a definite and serious gender bias. And as long as I've been working on this subject, like I said, it hasn't changed. And that is really disturbing looking forward. This is just, yeah, basically what I just told you. But then when you talk about how are we going to recover out of the pandemic? How are we going to deal with the destabilization that is happening as a product of these, you know, the invasion of the Ukraine, and this disproportionate impact on girls and women? I told my colleagues today, we're going to show up at the refugee centers and start teaching women how to get online and use laptops and use their phones and program and become data scientists and become cybersecurity experts. But we haven't even succeeded in doing this on the European landscape as it is, without all this other, you know, multiplying factors. These are all things that you've already heard. But just to kind of also look at the environment, because that's one of the topics that we have not discussed expressly today. This is a priority for the EU to rebuild, right? Is this, they call it the twin digital and green transition. This is how we will build the EU economy. And arguably, this is an area that would pose an opportunity for women if we have the digital skills, if we have the inclination in STEM sectors, for example. But there is a bias, regardless of the fact that there's no women coming through the pipeline. When we are active in these sectors, and here you can see some that I've highlighted, we don't get the same kind of funding as all male teams or even as mixed gender teams. And I know that Anne knows all about this. And that has to be unpacked, because I can't be working 24/7 to encourage more women into digital and STEM entrepreneurship. And Anne can't work to open up the funding channels if the biases are not, if these underlying biases are not addressed. And just as, so, and my last point before I wrap up, I want us for a moment, because you know, why do women become entrepreneurs? I mean, thinking in terms of what the recovery offers us as an opportunity. One really interesting outcome of COVID is, in fact, that more women in sub-Saharan Africa came online through e-commerce during COVID, right? It was like, it's do or die. So we're gonna learn these tools and these technologies, and we're gonna keep our businesses afloat. And they did that at a pace faster than men even. So that's quite impressive. But what's really important to understand that's linked to that is that women are driven out of traditional career paths by a factor of 80%. So 80% of women are marginalized by traditional career paths. Even without COVID, even without the other kinds of disturbances that are happening to the economy, these are the numbers. McKinsey has been researching this for as long as I've been preaching about it. 80% of women are marginalized by traditional career paths. This is the notorious glass ceiling, right? Imagine what the effect of COVID has been on this number. I don't have the data for Europe, but I know, for example, in the US, that pre-COVID, 51% of the workforce was made up by women. Now that number is 37%. And as a reaction to that, women go into startup. It's out of economic desperation, actually. We still have to bring in money. We still have to support ourselves and support our families. So this is what a woman entrepreneur looks like. And I want to bootstrap young people, but I also want everyone around the table to be aware of the fact that these are mature women. These are the women fleeing the Ukraine right now. They're older, they will start up on their own. 85% of women fly solo, but also 85% of solopreneurs are women, for example, in the UK. So try to get your brain around what a woman entrepreneur looks like, and then we can talk about what it is that we're going to do to help her. Some of the suggestions that you've already heard from my colleagues. And also then, how do we build forward better coming out of COVID? You know, how do we support these women to have skills to be ready for the future workforce, and to undertake enterprise themselves? I've got a lot of suggestions, but I think we should have a conversation now about that, and maybe go back to you, Sadia.
Okay, Cheryl, thank you so much. And that's one of the reasons I did ask for DLI to come on board. It's because of the work you do in terms of hackathons and workshops that you've done. Move It Forward, which I know very well. It's really been quite a game changer in the way that it's helped enable communities to work. So that was one of the reasons I really wanted to do this panel with you. And as you've said, you know, my intervention's a little bit similar in the sense that we saw with COVID that working from home had become essential. And during the pandemic, you know, we saw students and bankers and everybody just had to work from home, from policymakers to politicians. And I think that's kind of cemented the work ethos to be slightly different going forward, whatever it would be. Some people are arguing for maybe a 4-day week, which makes sense, especially impacting the climate. So, but working from home and online has become a norm and will continue anyway. And emergent technologies and methods now, which are vital for platforms which connect workers. So even if we're looking at product lines and supply chains, it's all, you know, dictated by technology to a certain extent. But nonetheless, with our work, we found that there was an alarming, and this was stop all kinds of productivity as far as women are concerned. And especially it was particularly alarming in the UK to find out how much online harassment had started to feature. This was a trend that picked up in at least 2016, when, you know, we saw online abuse, but it really took hold. We know that the pandemic saw a rise in violence against women domestically, but in definitely online as well. And the report found, and we did some work with the APPG group here in the UK, 14 girls as young as 14 experienced online harassment, and that during the pandemic, and that didn't make them want to come online, basically. I mean, so many ways that girls are now further being squeezed out of the space, digital space. And I'll call it also a democratic space, because it's very much a space about their rights, about their voting preferences, their choices. So I always say it's our democratic digital space. It's one of those things, and facing cyber sort of bullying. So that's obviously half the opportunities, and you know, it's not as if these women were in huge supply going forward to take tech roles in universities to begin with. So the under engagement in technological sectors produces also a huge economic deficit that we found, widening the income gap between men and women, compounded by COVID, and impacting, of course, what they say, the Sustainable Development Goals and Agenda 2030, which is not going to be possible, I guess, unless more women are online and able to earn in the way they are. And then we did, as I spoke earlier, the work with the Special Rapporteur's Office on highlighting this issue, and we had a lot of cooperation along along a wide policy remit on these from various high-level women who took up the issue, like at the APPG, I said. I see a direct link that there's also very few parliamentarians now taking up, or decision makers taking up office, just generally because of the backlash, because of a whole load of issues. And they're not only squeezed out of the democratic space, but also the digital space. And you know, unfortunately, COP26 did not address this at all, the impact that online violence had on obtaining the SDGs. So that was a key concern of ours. And yeah, so I'll leave it to that, and we'll have our discussions.
If I might just respond on that right away. I am so glad you highlighted online violence, because I think it actually is a subject that all of us, it brings together all of the issues that we're tackling, from, you know, the legal rights, democracy, like you said, also skills, because, you know, if we're not designing and building the space, then obviously we're coming into it from a very, it's a hostile environment, actually. And one of the things that you underscored there is that this is disproportionately impacting women in politics. I want to say women celebrities across the board, but in particular, women decision makers in the public sector. And you know, if we did nothing else but discuss this for the rest of the time that we have together to come up with how to respond to that, we would be doing all girls and women and underserved communities a big favor. And I might start with one, which is, it's the same that we're told in meetings where we are the only underserved you know, demographic at the table. Cheryl Sandberg famously said, lean in, you know, but others say, take up space. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I've been bullied in the public sphere and refused to step down. So I think that's one thing, take up space. But the other is, how can we have each other's backs? I think that's the other critical thing. Is I would really love the opportunity to throw up the you know, the red flare, like, you know, Anne, come help me now here, you know, where we can. But if we're all continuously scared, because it is scary, this has real ramifications in the private sphere. You know, as was mentioned by Gulsar, with the, you know, actually the Istanbul Convention, which is something we have every right to be very proud of as Europeans. This is not only about violence, but the threat of violence. So it does apply in the online environment, but the fear factor spreads beyond online. And aside from these anecdotal, you know, how do we have each other's backs as girls and women, right? How can we do that? But also, how do we change this dynamic completely to make it not an accepted narrative?
Right, and you know, one thing we also want to mention is intersectional and inclusive. So when we're looking at rights, if we're not online, it's, you know, a lot of this is done through being online, that intersectional aspect of being included in some way. And of course it is scary, and I'm not going to pretend that it's not, because and you know, I'm sure it's affected all of us in various degrees in different periods. So it does seem to have its impacts, or at least it carries ramifications long after what has happened. But another thing I want to mention is the aspect of diversity. So we've had intersectional, inclusive, but the aspect of diversity, I mean, just the fact that you're online does not mean that you have tools to be engaging online. And those tools need to be provided. They need, that support has to be there somehow, you know. It's really interesting when I was leading my modules in seeing how differently the men to the women would come up with the apps. You know, they're very intelligent and creative, but it was really interesting to see how they would appropriate, say, space, technology, AI, in the STEM fields, and see how what were the differences in the kind of creative aspects coming out. And that's a really another very interesting topic. So we've got sort of getting more women online, preserving and, you know, using it to enhance their creativity and their rights, human rights, their democratization. And how are we going to take this forward? Because you will also work with so many amazing communities that come up with these wonderful apps yourself. So that, Cheryl, is just very interesting. And also getting bigger, you know, as our worlds are changing, and we see, and COVID has pointed out, one main thing is that people learn that kindness was the way. It wasn't a me agenda, and it had to be so, because, you know, the sights that many people saw were very saddening and often horrific of their loved ones. And how are we going to get more women on board, young women on board, and safeguard things like the Istanbul Convention, safeguard their rights in terms of violence against women offline, to have that incorporated to laws that are violence, you know, protecting violence against women online. So those are the conversations I think we will continue to have, and in those areas we'd want to work.
And we definitely do. And I see that Mandy and both Lois are chomping at the bit to contribute here. And
No,
sure
brilliant.
Something lovely.
Sorry. Sorry, I had to move because my internet kind of crashed, so I've jumped onto my phone, sorry. I was just going to say, really good presentation and a great conversation. But one of the things that in the UK, which was really shocking, and I think that people didn't even believe that would happen. So there was like real pockets of deprivation in the host communities and with migrant groups and things like that, where there was a thing like of digital poverty. And we saw that women were really affected. And so one of the things that I was doing was that a lot of companies were you know, changing their equipment because they were going to work from home, and they had all this like kind of tech equipment that they were going to throw out. And I was like, please don't throw this out. You need to recondition it. Just take off whatever you need to, give it to a young person. Let's do this, because actually, you know, otherwise these children are going to be left behind. And I think, you know, we've got to look at all of those inequalities, and some of the things that we're talking about, intersectionality, is something I'm so passionate about, because like we're talking about women, but like women with disabilities, women of color, and all of those women are affected. And like you talked about earlier, Cheryl, it's equal pay day. But if you look at Afro-Caribbean women and Latino women in America, they're paid even worse than white Caucasian women. So there's a real conversation that really needs to continue. And I just wanted to make that point. And we've seen migrant women, women from Afghanistan, and all of those people who are never going to probably become homeowners because they, you know, don't get those high-end jobs, and they're ending up in the low-level entry jobs, and they're becoming dependent on benefits. And we've got to change that attitude. We've got to change the mindset and say to them, look, you know what, your wife has to work, because actually in your country, you may have stayed at home and you didn't always want to work, but actually living in the UK today, the cost of living is becoming more and more difficult for everybody. The fuels and everything else, it's become a lot more expensive and difficult for everybody. And it's having those different conversations, and it's talking about women empowerment, and it's about showing women taking control and showing them that you do have rights. And it's about showing them and making sure that this is what it looks like. So I just wanted to make those points, but thank you again, everyone.
Thank you so much for your work in that area, Mandy.
Cheryl,
it's really the whole spectrum. I see Lois wants to add, and Lois, by the way, is the engine behind WUNRN. So what an honor for us to hear from you.
We've known each other a long time and collaborated, but I would like to know the difference in the demographics of Southern Europe versus Northern Europe. I've lived in Southern Europe about 12 years. And when COVID came, it was totally different than what I was experiencing either online or reading in Northern Europe. All right. First of all, the children didn't have computers, and it took time for them to. And if someone had to stay home with that child, it was usually mother. And Italy had a high percentage of family businesses. And so the ability to work from home wasn't always available. So I think another point that comes up here is the care economy. Who takes care of the children, the handicapped, the elderly? In Italy, at least, it was expected that family would. And the last point is pensions. When women work in social welfare systems, countries, they get pensions, and everybody needs a pension. And so that's why your birth rate has gone down to almost zero. But the engagement of women in the digital world is very different. And we see that in media as well. UNESCO's Gender and Media program, look how often media women are threatened in person and online. They are the same women who are bringing us messages, and then look at Russia. You don't see the NGOs working on women's rights. You don't see the gender media people. We're at risk for that. So I just want to bring up those bullet points if anyone wants to talk about it. But living in Southern Europe was different. And we were involved with the European Union and in a number of cross-European activities, such as yours.
Well, I think Katharina has her hand raised and has a very unique perspective as both a Southern and Northern European.
Okay, from Spain.
Do you want to jump in, Katharina?
Yeah, I'm happy. So yeah, Luis, I cannot agree more with you on the care gap. Absolutely, this is an issue, and the pension gap. Thank you so much for raising this. It's really very important. That's why we as lawyers, we always tell our clients, our colleagues, friends, once you marry, please set up a contract with your partner, but also continue working. You should continue working. This is really important because also of your pension. You should start thinking of your pension when you're 20 already. So this is, I totally agree with you. However, I would disagree with you with Southern Europe. If we can, and I think I can give you some dates, facts, because it's always very important that we speak about facts. When we talk about gender equality, I think. So I think EIGE, the European Institute of Gender Equality, has a super, very good facts. And it's true that Italy, if I recall correctly, is not doing very well compared to the rest of European Union. So they seem to still be very conservative. The same with Greece, also relating to what you just said, the care gap. So it's expected from mothers or grandmothers to care for children and to stay at home. However, in Spain, this is different. So in Spain, we really have like a competition who is giving birth at the workplace. This is also crazy. I think this should not also, the other way around, a little bit crazy. And here we have to go back to work after 4 months of maternity leave. And now we have fathers that can have 4 months of paternity leave. So I think paternity leave is really important when we talk about the care gap, because once fathers also are obliged to take care of their children, we might close this gap. However, I wanted to also go back to Cheryl, what you just said about, and Sadia, thank you so much for the violence against women online. And I also wanted to, I totally agree with you, and me as a lawyer, I can only say sanction, sanction, sanction. And as long as we don't sanction this, we won't be able to prohibit this, unfortunately. And another thing we have not raised yet, I'm sorry, these are my sons. I'm mother of 3 sons, feminist sons, of course. Prostitution. Prostitution, and because we don't have to go to Afghanistan or to other countries, we have a huge problem within European Union. You in United Kingdom, you have slaves. You have slaves between you. You have trafficked women and children, and we have them in Spain as well. And we are not able to eradicate with trafficking children and women. And now, Cheryl, you said it before. Now with Ukraine, I'm also expecting the worst, because we know that the gangs are prepared now in order to catch vulnerable women and children, and we have to be prepared about this, because this is reality. And prostitution is a huge business, ladies and gentlemen, and there's a lot of money, so nobody's really interested in eradicating prostitution. And I think we should think about this and talk about this as well, because as long as we have prostitution, we won't be able to eradicate with gender-based violence. And this is, yeah, what I think about this. So Istanbul Convention, yes, but everybody has to apply it. I especially thinking of my colleagues, of judges, lawyers, attorneys, police officers. So we are all on board, but we all have to open our eyes, and we all have to, because the slaves are between us, and we have to eradicate this as a society. And as long as we are not capable of opening our eyes, we won't go anywhere. Sorry.
No, you go, girl. That's all I can say. But I want to take a little bit of a positive, an opportunity here, because it's exactly these things that we can hack as women with the skill sets. If we match that mission and that vision and that fury, that righteous fury, right? If we can match that with data about how women are treated by the law, in the quote justice system. If we can find the data about migration, counter those arguments out there that defend prostitution, right? So this is a little bit of my tact, and also the example of our work that Sadia very generously mentioned is to look at those challenges that are disproportionately impacting girls and women, give the girls and women the skills and the mission to fix those problems with technology. And then you have really a launching point for a kind of, hopefully a magnitude type of step change that we ourselves can engineer, right? But there's a lot of work that we need to be doing, and a lot of different voices that we have to be bringing together, including like what we're doing right here, right now, to have a legal perspective, to have the advocacy perspective, to have the skills perspective. And on that note, I wanted to bring Tamara and Anne back into the conversation, and even Golzar, if she's still out there. But Tamara, what can we be doing that here on the ground as far as that skilling of girls? Let's look at Europe as a vast opportunity, and what are the kinds of things that we need to be demanding at the member state level, or at the European level, even in terms of how we skill our girls for the future, how we reskill and upskill our women as well.
Yeah, great question, Cheryl. And I'm actually glad you also mentioned the importance of public-private sector collaboration, which is critical, right? Because one thing we know for sure, no single actor is going to close all of these gaps on their own, right? We see these times and times again, and obviously we as GSMA are quite, of course, we recognize the importance of that. And this is, of course, why we also co-founded the Equals Global Partnership for Gender Equality in the Digital Age back in 2016 with 4 other UN agencies, because we know that we need to work together. Now, on a European level, I mean, of course, you know, I cited the great example, and Cheryl, you did as well, of the digital scorecard as just one tool that I think any government can adopt there to track progress. Another example, which of course is no surprise. I mean, the EU, of course, is also very generously supporting such efforts, both, of course, in Europe, but also beyond. We have the excellent example of the EU Horizon 2020 program. And I'm actually happy to say that we as GSMA have been working over the past year and a half on an Equals EU project funded by the EU Horizon 2020 program to close the gender gap in social innovation across Europe. Why? Because as, and of course also discussed and of course everyone on today's conversation emphasized, we need to invest in money. And the uniqueness of this initiative is that we are actually trying to provide capacity building skills and knowledge to up and coming young women in Europe who are trying to launch their tech startups. It's a wonderful program, wonderful initiative. I'll share the link later on. But these are the kind of initiatives that I think governments should be supporting, right? I mean, the EU is obviously taking a leadership role here by providing such funding opportunities, by caring about such causes. But that's a great example of how we need to go to the grassroots level. I mean, it's fine to look right at the top and say, okay, what are the challenges? How do we research? How do we get the data and all of that? But at the end of the day, if we're not supporting, up and coming women and investing in them, right, as the leaders of the future, we go nowhere. So again, this is just one brief example, but I cannot emphasize the importance enough. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And I saw Anne had her hand raised, but yeah.
Yeah, I still do. Yeah, I just wanted to add on what you were saying, and actually what Lois was bringing up earlier about pension. I think one of the key points that we haven't mentioned yet that I wanted to put on the table is also around financial literacy. So teaching women and girls from a very early age all about money, about their rights with regard to having bank accounts, to owning land, but at a very basic level at school, teaching them how to manage a budget, teaching them how to save. So at primary school, and then moving that up into secondary school. Like I've been part of, I was so happy at one point to be able to go back to my primary school with an initiative to teach like 10-year-olds how to become entrepreneurs and to pitch to investors. And they did their market research with their younger classmates, and they had to go and pitch to everybody. It was phenomenal. And I think that's very important. We need to learn early on the value of money, the power it brings, because it opens up choices. Yeah. And the first thing is you need to like kind of invest in yourself. And so I think investing in yourself is also upskilling with your own financial literacy. It helps enormously then with your confidence when, if you decide to set up a business and you want to go looking for funding, you know, you're on a different level of confidence when you're seeking that investment. And even coming back to Lois's point about pensions, even starting to save very, very early and teaching our children to save at from the beginning and in the beginning of their careers as young professionals, to already put aside 20% of their income every month into a bank account. Even my son has just turned 18 and my daughter is 20. And I've got them both to open up life assurance, and they're looking at me. They put 30 euros a month into it. I said, that's all. 30 euros a month. You start now, and by the time it comes when you're more in your 20s or 30s and you want to go for loans, you'll have a nest egg. You don't touch it, and that's going to build up your credit rating. So things that I didn't know, I'm passing on thanks to being exposed to these ideas. And I want to put that on the table as well, so that we want and need to upskill our women and girls on digital literacy, financial literacy as well. And that will help build their confidence to build businesses in the future too.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I'm very conscious now that we're down to the wire as far as time. So I'm going to throw out my last remarks and then hand it over to Sadia, maybe to wrap us up. I love that we're focusing on these really practical things. And I put something on LinkedIn on International Women's Day that nobody saw and nobody repeated, but I want to commit to you, and I would like to ask you to also commit to each other and the attendees who are here and whoever sees this video. I think that our starting point is really what we do for our community, and I consider you all, or I'm honored to be part of this community with you, and that we're accountable to other women. And I just had a small, inspiration that we could communicate that by saying that we are here for her. A little hashtag that you can use in your LinkedIn profile. That means your door is open for anyone, any age, and I mean also among us, right? And I even thought, well, and couldn't we also start this movement with like a Here for Hers Day, Thursdays? Thursday is very popular, but to have office hours, where I put up the open sign, and anyone, when that sign is open on a Thursday, can come and ask you for a reference, ask you for a job, ask you for the seat at the table. Because I think we hesitate to do that, right? Because of all those weird things that are keeping us from asking for more. But so from the other side, if we can just say, you're welcome to ask me, and I'm gonna do whatever I can to help you. I just thought that this might be a really kind of a small but meaningful way to be able to do that. And then also to start keeping track, like keep our own KPIs of how often we are doing this. How many recommendations did I write this week? How many women did I talk to for 5 minutes? How many job offers did I circulate? And to hold ourselves accountable, because I think that's
I just circulated one in the live question. I did in the queue because someone asked how to get into VC, and I saw that how does a young woman get into VC? And I saw a job thing come up, and I said, oh, boom, and it's in there already, so you'll see it. But I also think, to add to what you're saying, Cheryl, is let's also pass on work opportunities and paid opportunities. That's very important, because women are really good at supporting, mentoring, and giving help to each other, but not for getting paid for it. And that's the difference with men. They wouldn't do all that for free. And I know I struggle with it because I have a huge heart, like everybody here, all the panelists here. I would love to give away my time and my knowledge and my network to everybody for free. If I had the magic power, that's what I would do. At the same time,
time is money, though, isn't it? Time is money, and
time is money. Thank you, Mandy. It is.
Yeah.
And speaking of time,
we need to be recognized for our contributions, because that's a big challenge. That's why the pay gap still exists. We're perpetuating.
Well, the other thing is being transparent about salaries. That's the other thing that we could do, but it's embarrassing because we always earn less than our male counterparts. But it's a starting point.
But it's also about knowing your worth, because like I do a lot of talks and events, and I will help charities and I'll give away my time and I'll do things. But it's again, when you've been asked to go to corporate events, and then I'll say to them, what do you mean? Because like, you wouldn't say that to any of the men in the room. Why are you doing it to me? And I said, I'm not going to haggle, because I know my worth. And if you want, you go and find somebody else. And then they soon come back with their tail between their legs, literally. So I think it is a really good point, Anne, because it is. And it's about, when we're looking at young people, giving them opportunities. So like, to me, I'm now flying to New York next month. I've been inundated with speaking opportunities. I can't be in 2 or 3 places at once. So I always say to other people, please, why don't you give that gig to somebody else? Because actually you're giving other people an opportunity. And if we pay it forward, and as I always say, my glass is so full, it's overpouring. And if I keep paying it forward, that's when new opportunities come to me. And that's the way that the universe and the world works. And I think if we took that all away and paid it forward, trust me, the world would be a lot nicer place.
And I think this idea of Here for Her Day, I mean, that's amazing. Even if it's once a week and you make sure you do something for somebody, it would tick off, and you would make sure you did that thing, whether it's something as little as getting groceries for your neighbor who's sick or whatever, and really making a point of that. And it adds up. If everybody did that, it would add up. And I'm I'm all for here for her day hashtag and
There
doing
you are.
it.
You were looking for a hashtag, weren't you?
Yes.
She was looking for a hashtag.
But Cheryl, it's Cheryl's hashtag.
No, it's not mine. It's ours.
No,
Let's push it out there.
But
I
yeah.
want to see it everywhere. And
I
let's
think
do it.
I want to celebrate as well what the female quotient are doing, Mandy and Holly.
And all of you, please host a dinner in your country. Everyone, please do that. I think what I would love everyone to do is on the 23rd, please bring women to the table, whether you're mentoring. It doesn't matter if you got one person or 10 people or 50 people, it doesn't matter. It's about bringing people to the table, having that conversation. Please sign up. I've sent all of you the link. Then please sign up and host your own dinner, and it will be great. You know, it started with 25 people, then they brought 10 people, it went to 250, then it went by to 250,000, and we're going to go way bigger than that because we're in 100 and something countries, I think 134 countries. So, you know, we want people on the 23rd to host an event, hashtag us in, tag me in, I will retweet you, tag you all back as well. And we're going all over the world with it. And it's been phenomenal. And I feel like we want you to all be a part. We're all over Times Square with the campaign as well. So, you know, it's gone huge. And I just love all of you to be a part of it. Give a seat to a young person or another woman on that day. And like Shelley always says, 1 and 1 makes 11, not 2. So, you know, I think on that point, it's really important.
That's another good one.
And I would say, if I can add to that as well, I would say buy from her. You got to buy from women entrepreneurs. And that's also, I've put in the link in the chat, the link to our directory, because during COVID, I was saying, how can I help women, you know, when their businesses are shut and so on. So I created an online directory of companies founded and co-founded by women, so the consumers, you can find them. Like, you see me drinking my bottle, this is Swell, it's Wonder Woman 84, by the way, because I'm a big Wonder Woman and I'm like, woohoo, we're all Wonder Women here. But it's Swell, this shaped bottle, it's a woman entrepreneur who created it. Like, so I'm always trying to buy from women as much as possible, from the smallest to the biggest. And if you don't know where, you can start looking on the directory. Just go have a look and find a woman entrepreneur. And if you want to recommend one to apply to be featured, tell her, you know, to go to the link, because there's a link to apply and it's for free. So there's so many things here. Mentor women, bring her to the table, pass on the opportunities. Here for her Thursdays. You got your dinner next week. You got to buy from the women. You got to help them build their pensions. You got to prevent the, access to violence,
equity.
Everything. You have a very long to-do list.
Avoid prostitution. Prostitution, no.
Prostitution, no, exactly. So find a way from everything you've heard. Find one thing that you can go ahead and do as from tomorrow. One thing that you commit to doing, and that will make that difference.
Absolutely.
What does Golzar have to say about all this? Are you still there?
Golzar.
Maybe she should have the last word.
Golzar. I don't know. Her internet's not so good.
I know mine's good.
I don't know if she's there. Let me check on my phone. Lois wants to say something. Lois, your mic is on mute.
Sadia, I'm here.
Okay.
Okay. Golzar is here. Sarah, are you there? Well,
yes, I'm here.
You're an entrepreneur, and if you've been listening to these presentations, you are a perfect example of a woman who created a business and who is able to take a leadership role on that.
Yes, this is my third year. Yes, this is my third year in business. I built it up. Yes.
Bravo.
And support us during this.
And we're buying from her.
Yeah.
Sarah, are we finished with our time yet, or do we have more?
So, yes, we're 7 minutes over our allotted
Thank you,
time.
everybody.
So
thank you.
I just wanted to ask Sarah, are you going to give us, email us the chat so we have all the links, or what will happen, please?
Yes, I'm working with Lois on getting the video ready, and I'll have the chat ready as well. So everybody will have all the links.
Perfect.
Well, we still have attendees here. Maybe if we can float the question out before we hang up or start talking logistics. I see that Peggy is making a comment. 10th year in business and heavily supported by other women entrepreneurs and women. That's the best practice, isn't it? To find your community and support each other.
That's
Anyone
the other
else out there who wants to field the question to the panel, maybe, until they cut us off? I don't see any questions coming in.
No.
Maybe if we could have, if you could give us some feedback here and just say, what have you thought of this panel? Tell us live in one sentence. Even that is a gift, and it's always good because
thank you for this amazing session. We
there
got
you
that
go,
one.
Peggy. You read my mind.
Wow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I think then the next step is that we can certainly look for the link to the recording so that we can share it beyond this group, and to just say thank you. Thank you to my lovely team. I know I can always go to when I need you. And look, our team that's expanding. This is wonderful, bringing
it's brilliant.
these communities together. Really great meeting and seeing friends from the past, friends from the future. Someone's linking in from Kenya. How cool is that?
Brilliant.
Or the
Thank
Kenya
you.
CSW meeting. Thank you for joining us. Sadia, can I let you have the last word?
I just again want to say thank you. Thank you for bringing your insights. A big thank you to Cheryl for putting us all together, to Mandy, to Tamara, Anna, Catherine, Golzar, especially to Lois, who's really been, you know, a super trooper for so many years and has run WUNRN to the level and the integrity that still sustains. So thank you for all of you. And I hope we can keep in touch, and maybe next year, if we have CSW, we can see how far we got on these goals that we've implemented.
Yes, we'll keep our count your key performance indicators, and let's report next year. It's
and hopefully you're all going to host a dinner next week and bring loads of girlfriends together. That'll be great, and pay it forward.
Let's do this. Let's pay it forward.
What a great competition. Thank you, guys.
Thank you all. See you on the 23rd.
Hugs. Hugs.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks again.
Bye bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.